The weak exist to serve the strong. Victor Steele's voice boomed through the Pine Ridge Pack meeting hall. The alpha leader stood tall before his assembled wolves, his silver hair catching the firelight, medals from his Vietnam service gleaming on his chest. His weathered face, lined with 65 years of hard living, showed no compassion as he outlined the emergency protocols for the impending blizzard. Outside, the Montana winter howled with growing fury. Weather reports called it the storm of the century. Temperatures would drop to 40 below, the kind of cold that freezes lungs and stops hearts. In the back of the hall, Sarah Reed kept her eyes downcast. At 28, she was the pack's only Omega, the lowest rank in wolf hierarchy. 10 years had passed since her parents' death, 10 years of surviving alone in a decrepit cabin at the edge of territory no other wolf wanted. All pack members will shelter in the community building, Victor continued, his gaze deliberately skipping over Sarah. We have generators, supplies, and strength in numbers. Sarah felt a flutter of hope. Perhaps this time would be different. Perhaps in the face of such danger, even an Omega would be welcome. Her hope died as Derek Foster, Victor's beta enforcer, stepped forward. His wife Elizabeth clutched his arm, her perfect features twisted in disgust as Sarah approached. "Excuse me," Sarah said, her voice barely audible above the murmur of conversation. "I wanted to ask about shelter arrangements." Derek's laugh cut through the room, silencing several conversations. "You can't be serious. The community building is for contributing pack members. What do you contribute exactly, besides taking up space?" Elizabeth's crystalline laugh joined her husband's. "Honestly, Sarah, you'd probably be warmer in your little shack anyway. Less body heat for you means more for everyone else." Sarah felt her chest tighten. 10 years, and still the pain of public humiliation never dulled. Victor moved towards them, his expression a practiced mask of regret that never reached his eyes. "Sarah," he said, his tone falsely paternal, "with limited resources, we must prioritize. You understand." But Sarah did understand, more than Victor realized. She understood that behind his civic-minded facade lay a decades-old vendetta. In her mind flashed an image from childhood. Victor sitting at their family table, laughing with her father James, his eyes lingering too long on her mother, before everything changed. "I understand perfectly, Alpha Steele," she replied, using his formal title. "I've survived worse." The words hung in the air between them, charged with history neither acknowledged openly. Victor's jaw tightened, the only indication that her words had found their mark. "See that you do," he said, finally turning away. Sarah left the warmth of the community building, stepping into the first cutting winds of the approaching storm. The temperature had already dropped 20 degrees since sundown. Her cabin stood a mile into the forest, a small structure originally built as a storage shed that the pack had grudgingly provided when her parents died. Inside, Sarah moved with practiced efficiency, blocking drafts with towels, gathering her meager firewood supply, inventorying her food. 3 cans of beans, 2 packets of oatmeal, half a loaf of bread already growing stale. By midnight, the storm had transformed into a howling monster. The temperature inside, despite the roaring stove, hovered just above freezing. Sarah wrapped herself in every blanket she owned, yet still her fingers grew numb. If she died out here, they'd find her body in the spring thaw and shrug. Poor Omega, couldn't handle the cold. At least she didn't drain our resources. The thought came unbidden, bitter but honest. Sarah pushed it away, focusing instead on survival. 1 hour at a time, 1 minute at a time if necessary. The storm had raged for 2 days when she heard it, a sound beneath the howling wind, a scratching, weak and desperate, at her door. Sarah froze, spoon halfway to her lips. The scratching came again, fainter this time. Her wolf stirred inside her, senses sharpening. Something alive was outside, something dying in this killing cold. Opening the door meant losing precious heat. Opening the door in this storm was suicide. The wind could extinguish her fire, bury her supplies in snow, leave her to freeze alongside whatever creature sought shelter. The logical choice was clear. Yet Sarah found herself remembering the feeling of standing outside the pack house years ago, scratching at the door after being locked out as a prank. She had stood in the cold for 3 hours before someone finally heard her. The scratching came a third time, accompanied by a whimper so faint she almost missed it. "Don't be stupid," she whispered to herself. "It's probably just debris, a branch." But her hand was already on the door latch. The blizzard exploded into her cabin with physical force. Snow blinded her instantly. Wind tore at her clothes, her hair, stealing her breath. The coal burned like fire against her exposed skin. There, on her doorstep, half buried in a snowdrift, lay a wolf. A real wolf, not a werewolf in human form. Gray and white, medium-sized, its fur crusted with ice. Amber eyes met hers with desperate intelligence before closing weakly. "No, no, no!" Sarah gasped, dropping to her knees. The snow soaked through her pants instantly, so cold it ached to the bone. She grabbed the wolf under its front legs and pulled. It was heavier than expected, dead weight against her Omega strength. Her muscles screamed as she dragged the animal inside, grunting with the effort. She turned to close the door, but stopped, frozen by what she saw. Eyes gleamed in the darkness beyond her doorway. Multiple pairs. More wolves emerged from the white curtain of the blizzard like ghosts. Gray, black, brown, white. All covered in ice, all stumbling toward her cabin with the last dregs of their strength. Sarah's breath caught. There were so many. At least a dozen more wolves drawn by the light and warmth of her small home. Her cabin was barely big enough for her, let alone 15 large wolves. But watching them sway on weakening legs, ice crusting their fur, eyes pleading with human intelligence, Sarah knew she couldn't close the door. Not even to save herself. One by one, she dragged them across her threshold, each heavier than the last, each extraction into the blizzard stealing more of her body heat, more of her strength. The snow rose past her knees as she worked, her fingers turning blue, then gray with cold. And then she saw him. The last wolf, massive, pitch black, with eyes like molten gold. He stood apart from where the others had fallen, watching her with unnerving intelligence. He was easily twice the size of the others, his presence commanding even in this weakened state. Sarah stared back, swaying on her feet. Her strength was gone. Her cabin already packed with 14 large wolves, the heat rapidly dissipating each time she opened the door. The black wolf held her gaze, making no move toward her, offering no plea, simply watching, waiting. "I can't," she whispered, her voice lost in the wind. "I'm sorry." She turned toward her door, took one step, then stopped. Something inside her refused to take another step. Not mercy exactly, but something deeper. A refusal to be what the pack believed her to be. Worthless, selfish, weak. "I may be the lowest," she said through chattering teeth, "but I am not heartless." Sarah plunged back into the storm. The black wolf was heavier than all the others combined, it seemed. Her muscles failed repeatedly as she tried to drag him. Her vision darkened around the edges. Still she pulled. Inch by excruciating inch, through snow now waist-deep, she hauled the massive black wolf toward her door. When she finally got him inside and closed the door, Sarah collapsed. Her cabin had transformed into a sea of wet fur and labored breathing. 15 wolves packed so tightly they warmed each other. She had no strength left to reach her bed, so she simply curled against the nearest wolf, allowing its body heat to begin thawing her frozen limbs. As consciousness faded, Sarah could have sworn she felt the black wolf's golden eyes still watching her, calculating, measuring something she couldn't understand. When Sarah awoke, hours or perhaps days later, the first thing she noticed was that she wasn't alone in being awake. The gray wolf she'd rescued first was watching her with intelligent amber eyes, too intelligent. Sarah knew immediately what she was seeing. Not ordinary wolves, werewolves, from another pack, caught in the storm while in wolf form. As if confirming her realization, the gray wolf's form began to blur. Bones shifted beneath fur. The transformation was partial, conserving energy, but enough to reveal a human face within the wolf's ruff. A woman's face with sharp cheekbones and calculating eyes. "You saved us," the wolf woman said, her voice hoarse. "Wait." Sarah couldn't explain the instinct that had driven her to risk her life for strangers. "You needed help," she said simply. The wolf woman studied her for a long moment. "My name is Sierra Hayes. We're Royal Guard, patrolling the northern border when the storm hit. We underestimated its severity." Sarah's mind reeled. The Royal Pack was legendary, the ruling body of all werewolf packs across North America. Their territory was rumored to exist somewhere deep in the Montana wilderness, but few from ordinary packs ever saw it. "I'm Sarah," she said, too exhausted for proper introductions. "Sarah Reed, Omega of Pine Ridge Pack." Sierra's eyes widened. "An Omega? You dragged 15 royal wolves to safety by yourself?" Sarah glanced around at the massive bodies filling her small cabin. "I couldn't leave you out there." Sarah's expression softened into something like respect. "No, it seems you couldn't. Over the next hours, as the storm continued its assault, Sarah tended to the wolves. She melted snow for water, shared her precious food supplies, and treated frostbitten paws with a herbal salve her mother had taught her to make. Most of the wolves remained in their animal forms, conserving energy, but Sierra shifted occasionally to speak with Sarah. She explained they were an elite border patrol, caught off guard when the storm arrived hours earlier than predicted. They'd been forced too far from royal territory, becoming disoriented in the whiteout conditions. "We would have died without you," Sierra said bluntly. "All of us. Even him." She nodded toward the massive black wolf, who remained apart from the others, watching Sarah's every move with those unsettling golden eyes. "Who is he?" Sarah asked, feeling a strange connection to the wolf who hadn't taken his eyes off her since she dragged him inside. Sierra's expression changed, becoming guarded. "Someone important. Very important." Before Sarah could press further, one of the other wolves whimpered in pain. A brown male with a laceration on his shoulder that Sarah hadn't noticed earlier. She moved to him automatically, applying her salve with gentle fingers. "You have a healer's touch," Sierra observed. "Unusual in an Omega." Sarah thought of her mother, an Omega like herself, who had possessed an almost magical ability to soothe injuries. "My mother taught me some things before she died." "Your mother," Sierra repeated, something like recognition flickering across her features. "What was her name?" "Elise Reed. She and my father James died in an accident when I was 18, 10 years ago." Sierra grew very still. "James Reed was your father, the James Reed?" Sarah frowned, confused by the reaction. "Yes, he was Beta of Pine Ridge before Victor Steele became Alpha," Sierra finished, her voice hardening. "Interesting." Sarah wanted to ask what was interesting about it, but the brown wolf under her hands whimpered again, drawing her attention back to his injury. As she worked, she felt the black wolf's gaze intensify, burning into her back like physical heat. 3 days passed, the storm gradually losing its fury. Sarah shared everything she had, rationing her own food to ensure the wolves were fed. She slept in short bursts, always awakening to find the black wolf's golden eyes upon her. Never threatening, but intense in their scrutiny. On the morning of the fourth day, Sierra approached Sarah as she stoked the wood stove with her last pieces of firewood. "The storm is breaking," Sierra said. "We'll be able to leave soon." Sarah nodded, trying to ignore the strange, hollow feeling in her chest. After days of crowded companionship, her cabin would seem unbearably empty again. "Your pack," Sierra continued carefully. "Do they know you've sheltered us?" "No," Sarah replied. "No one from Pine Ridge would brave the storm to check on an Omega." Sierra's expression darkened. "That's not how packs should treat their own, especially not one with your lineage." Before Sarah could ask what she meant, a commotion rose from the far side of the cabin. The black wolf was stirring, really stirring, for the first time in days. The other wolves moved back respectfully, creating space despite the cramped quarters. The air around the black wolf shimmered, his massive form blurring as bones and muscles rearranged themselves. The transformation was seamless, elegant despite the confined space. Where the wolf had been, a man now stood. He was tall, powerfully built, with broad shoulders and the confident posture of someone accustomed to command. His hair was black with distinguished silver at the temples, his face weathered but handsome with a strong jaw and high cheekbones. A jagged scar crossed his chest, visible above the waistband of the pants that had materialized with his transformation. But it was his eyes that held Sarah transfixed. The same molten gold as his wolf form, they seemed to see through her, into her, measuring her worth with cool precision. Every other wolf in the cabin lowered their heads as he rose to his full height. Sierra dropped to one knee, her head bowed. "My king," she murmured. Sarah's breath caught. King. There was only one king among werewolves. Ethan Blackwood, Alpha of Alphas, ruler of all 7 major North American packs. And she had dragged him across her threshold like a sack of flour. Ethan Blackwood regarded Sarah silently for a long moment, his golden eyes unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice was deep, resonant, carrying authority without effort. "You saved wolves who could kill you with a single bite," he said. "Why?" The question wasn't accusatory, but genuinely curious. Sarah straightened her spine, meeting his gaze despite the intimidating power radiating from him. "Because they needed saving," she answered simply. "Wolf or human, no one deserves to freeze to death outside my door." Ethan tilted his head slightly, studying her as if she were a puzzle with missing pieces. "Even knowing nothing about us? Even risking your own survival?" Sarah thought about the pack that had abandoned her, about Victor's cold dismissal, about 10 years of isolation. Especially then, she said softly. Something shifted in Ethan's expression, a softening around the eyes that transformed his entire face. Your father was James Reed. It wasn't a question. Sarah nodded, surprised. You knew him? He saved my life 25 years ago. Ethan touched the scar on his chest. During the Northern Rebellion, we served together before that in the Gulf War. He was the finest warrior I've ever known and the most honorable man. Sarah's throat tightened with unexpected emotion. Her father, recognized by the Alpha King himself. Victor Steele told everyone he died in a hunting accident, she said, he and my mother both. Ethan's expression darkened, his golden eyes flashing with something dangerous. That was no accident, Sarah Reed. Your father died protecting a royal secret, and Victor Steele knows exactly how and why. The cabin fell completely silent, every wolf watching the exchange with rapt attention. Sarah felt the ground shifting beneath her, 10 years of accepted truth crumbling away. What secret? She whispered. Before Ethan could answer, a howl pierced the morning air. Close. Too close. Ethan and Sierra exchanged sharp glances. Pine Ridge wolves, Sierra confirmed, moving to the window. At least 20, and others with them I don't recognize. Northern scent, one of the other wolves growled, having partially shifted to speak. Frost's people. Ethan moved with fluid grace to Sarah's side. Your pack is coming, Sarah, and they're not alone. His golden eyes held hers, intense and urgent. The storm is passing, but a different kind of danger approaches. What you've done by saving us may have changed everything. Are you prepared for what comes next? Sarah thought of her empty, lonely existence, of Victor's decades of subtle cruelty, of her parents whose death suddenly seemed shrouded in mystery. Yes, she said firmly, I'm ready. Ethan's lips curved into a slight smile, the first she'd seen from him. Good, because after today, nothing will ever be the same. The approaching wolves moved with purpose through the lightning snowfall, their scent carried on the wind to the sensitive noses inside Sarah's cabin. 15 royal wolves, still recovering from near death, tensed as they caught the mixed scents of Pine Ridge pack and unfamiliar northern wolves. Sarah peered through her frosted window. Victor Steele led the group, his gray wolf form unmistakable, even at a distance. Derek and Elizabeth Foster flanked him, with others from Pine Ridge spread in a loose formation. Interspersed among them were larger wolves with distinctive white markings, moving with military precision. Conrad Frost's wolves, Ethan said quietly, coming to stand behind Sarah. His presence radiated heat and power. Victor has allied with the Northern rebels. Sarah turned to him, confusion evident. Northern rebels? Separatists who believe werewolves should rule openly over humans, Sierra explained from nearby. Led by Conrad Frost, an alpha who was banished from the council 15 years ago. And Victor is working with them? Sarah couldn't hide her shock. Victor had always been rigid about pack isolation, refusing even basic cooperation with neighboring packs. Your alpha has harbored resentments for decades, Ethan said, his voice hard, against the royal pack, against your father, against the entire established order. The approaching wolves stopped at the tree line, forming a semicircle around the cabin's clearing. Victor shifted to human form, now wearing the practical winter clothing he'd carried tied to his wolf leg. He stepped forward alone, his breath clouding in the frigid air. Sarah Reed, down, he called, his voice carrying across the snow. We've come to ensure your safety after the storm. Please open the door. The lie was so transparent, Sarah almost laughed. Victor had never once checked on her welfare in 10 years. Ethan's hand settled on her shoulder, warm and steadying. He knows we're here. One of them must have seen us enter your cabin before the worst of the storm hit. Sarah nodded. What do we do? Ethan surveyed the cabin, mentally calculating. We're outnumbered, and many of my wolves are still weak from exposure. We need time. He glanced at Sierra, communicating silently in the way of wolves who had fought together for years. She nodded, understanding his unspoken command. Sierra will take most of our wolves out the back while Victor is focused on the front, Ethan explained to Sarah. Once they're safely away, you and I will deal with Victor. Sarah's eyes widened. Me? What can I do against an alpha and his pack? Ethan's golden gaze held something she couldn't decipher. More than you know, Sarah Reed, far more than you know. Outside, Victor called again, impatience edging his voice. Sarah, acknowledge me as your alpha. Sierra organized the royal wolves with silent efficiency, preparing them for a strategic retreat through the cabin's rear window. Sarah watched, impressed by their discipline even in weakened states. The smallest wolf, a young female Sierra had called Riley, limped badly, her front paw still swollen from frostbite. Sarah knelt beside her. "Let me help," she whispered, placing her hands gently on the injured paw. A strange warmth flowed from Sarah's palms, a sensation she'd experienced occasionally when treating injuries, but had never understood. The swelling in Riley's paw visibly reduced under her touch. Sarah looked up to find Ethan watching her intently, a knowing expression on his face. "Just as I suspected," he murmured, too quietly for the others to hear. Victor's voice boomed again from outside. "Sarah Reed, by pack law, I command you to open this door." Sarah rose, a new determination flooding her veins. "I should talk to him. Buy time for the others to escape." Ethan studied her face, then nodded once. "I'll remain hidden until they're away." "But Sarah," his voice dropped lower, "trust nothing, Victor says. Nothing." Sarah approached her cabin door, drew a deep breath, and opened it just wide enough to see out without revealing the cabin's interior. Victor stood 10 feet away, his silver hair whipping in the wind, his face a mask of false concern. Behind him, Derek and Elizabeth watched with poorly concealed hostility. The northern wolves remained in animal form, their white-marked muzzles carrying scars from old battles. "There you are," Victor said, his voice dripping with insincere relief. "We were concerned when you didn't appear after the storm." "Were you?" Sarah kept her voice neutral. "That would be a first." Victor's friendly expression flickered. "We're your pack, Sarah. Of course we worry." The lie hung between them, so blatant even Derek shifted uncomfortably. "What do you want, Victor?" Sarah asked directly, watching Sierra and the royal wolves silently filing out the back window from the corner of her eye. Victor's gaze sharpened. "I've received reports of trespassers in our territory. Royal wolves possibly injured in the storm. Have you seen anything unusual?" "Just snow," Sarah replied evenly, "for 3 days straight." Victor studied her face, clearly disbelieving. "May I come in to ensure you're well?" Behind Victor, one of the northern wolves growled softly, impatient with the charade. Victor shot at a warning glance. "My cabin is barely big enough for me," Sarah said. "And frankly, after being denied shelter in the community building, I find your sudden concern insulting." Victor's facade cracked, irritation showing through. "This isn't about past grievances, Sarah. This is about pack security. Royal wolves in our territory could mean war. Or they could simply be travelers caught in a storm," Sarah countered. "Isn't offering shelter one of the ancient laws of wolf hospitality?" Victor's eyes narrowed dangerously. "You've sheltered them, haven't you? After everything the pack has done for you." Sarah felt a surge of anger she'd suppressed for years. "Done for me? You gave me a shed to live in after my parents died under mysterious circumstances. You've excluded me from pack gatherings, denied me resources, and treated me as less than nothing for a decade. What exactly should I be grateful for, Alpha Steel?" The formal title emerged as a challenge rather than respect. Victor's face flushed with rage, his control slipping. "Your father was a traitor to this pack," he snarled, abandoning pretense. "Conspiring with the royal dogs, undermining true wolf independence. Everything I've done to protect Pine Ridge from their corruption." Sarah felt the truth click into place. "You had him killed. You had both my parents killed." It wasn't a question. Victor's expression confirmed everything. "I did what was necessary," Victor said coldly. "James was going to expose our alliance with the northern packs. He and your mother had become liabilities." Behind her, Sarah felt rather than heard Ethan move closer to the door, listening. "And what about me?" she asked, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. "Was I a liability too?" Victor's expression shifted to something almost pitying. "You were an Omega, harmless, not worth the trouble of eliminating." From the tree line, one of the northern wolves barked impatiently. Victor glanced back, then fixed Sarah with a hard stare. "Enough conversation. Step aside. We know the Royal Alpha is in there, wounded, vulnerable. Hand him over, and perhaps we can forget your treason against your own pack." Sarah didn't move. "I have no idea what you're talking about." Victor's patience snapped. "Derek, Elizabeth, bring her out and search the cabin." The Fosters moved forward eagerly, but before they reached the steps, an unexpected voice rang out. "Wait!" Derek Foster stopped, turning toward his wife in surprise. Elizabeth stepped forward, her perfect features troubled. "Victor, this isn't right. Sarah has done nothing wrong by helping injured wolves." Victor turned on her, incredulous. You dare question me? After all these years? Elizabeth straightened, something resolute forming in her expression. I was friends with Elise Reed before you turned us against her family. I've watched Sarah suffer for a decade because of your vendetta. Yes, I dare question this. Derek stared at his wife as if seeing her for the first time, then slowly moved to stand beside her. Elizabeth is right, this has gone too far. Sarah watched in astonishment as cracks formed in Victor's authority. Behind her, she felt Ethan's presence, ready to intervene if needed. Victor's face contorted with rage. Traitors, all of you! He gestured sharply to the northern wolves. Take them! Find Blackwood! The white-marked wolves surged forward, but before they reached the cabin, a thunderous roar split the air. Ethan Blackwood stepped through the doorway, positioning himself protectively in front of Sarah. The northern wolves faltered, instinctively responding to the presence of the Alpha King. Even in his human form, Ethan's power rolled off him in palpable waves. Victor Steele, Ethan's voice carried the weight of ancient authority. You stand accused of murder, treason against the council, and conspiracy with condemned separatists. How do you answer these charges? Victor's face drained of color, but defiance still burned in his eyes. I answer to no king. Wolves were meant to be free, not subservient to your puppet council. One of the northern wolves, larger than the others, suddenly shifted to human form. A man with white blonde hair and cold blue eyes stepped forward. Enough talking, he said, his accent marking him as Canadian. Kill the girl. Take Blackwood alive. We've wasted too much time already. Conrad Frost, Sarah realized. The rebel alpha himself. Ethan moved with blinding speed, placing himself fully between Sarah and the threat. Touch her, and not one of you leaves this clearing alive. The protective fury in his voice sent shivers through everyone present. Even Frost hesitated. She's just an Omega, Victor argued, bewildered by Ethan's reaction. Worthless to you. Ethan's golden eyes blazed. She saved 15 royal wolves from certain death, at risk to her own life. She's shown more courage, compassion, and honor than you have in your entire miserable existence, Victor Steele. His gaze swept over the gathered wolves. And she is under my personal protection. Any harm to her will be answered tenfold. The clearing fell silent as everyone absorbed this extraordinary declaration. The Alpha King himself claiming protection over an Omega from a minor pack. The standoff might have continued indefinitely, but a howl cut through the tension. Then another, and another. From the forest behind the cabin, royal wolves emerged. Not just the 14 Sarah had saved, but dozens more. The Royal Guard had arrived, summoned by Sierra. Conrad Frost assessed the changing odds, then backed away slowly. Another time, Blackwood. This isn't over. He shifted back to wolf form and retreated into the trees with his followers. Victor remained, his face a mask of thwarted rage as his allies abandoned him. Victor Steele, Ethan said formally, you are hereby stripped of your alpha status for crimes against your pack in the council. Derek Foster will serve as interim alpha until formal hearings can be arranged. Derek stepped forward, stunned but resolute. I accept the responsibility, Your Majesty. Victor's face contorted. You can't do this. This is my pack, my territory. Not anymore, Ethan replied coldly. Guards, escort former Alpha Steele to the community building. He is confined there until the council arrives. Royal wolves moved to serenade on Victor, who glared at Sarah with pure hatred. This is your fault. You're nothing. An Omega. You should have frozen to death in that pathetic cabin. Sarah met his gaze without flinching. Perhaps, but I didn't. I survived, Victor. Just as I've survived every cruelty you've inflicted for 10 years. The difference is now everyone knows what you truly are. As the guards led Victor away, Ethan turned to Sarah, something like admiration in his golden eyes. Your father would be proud, he said quietly. Very proud indeed. Sarah felt tears threatening, years of emotion breaking through carefully maintained walls. What happens now? Ethan looked at the cabin that had been both her prison and sanctuary for a decade. Now, Sarah Reed, daughter of James, you have a choice to make. What choice? You can remain here with Derek as your new alpha, Ethan said, or you can come with us to royal territory. Sarah looked around at the clearing, at the pack members who had shunned her for years, at the tiny cabin that held nothing but painful memories. Why would you offer me a place among the royal pack? She asked. I'm just an Omega. Ethan's expression softened. Are you, the daughter of James Reed, who saved 15 royal wolves through sheer determination? Who healed injuries with a touch? Who faced down an alpha and rebel leader without flinching? He shook his head slowly. I don't believe you're just anything, Sarah Reed. Sierra approached, now fully recovered, her expression respectful. The king is right. There's more to you than even you know. Sarah thought of her father's final words. You're stronger than they know, little one. If I go with you, she said carefully, what would I be to the royal pack? Ethan considered her question seriously. At first, a guest under my protection. Beyond that depends on you. Your father earned his place among us through loyalty and courage. I suspect his daughter will find her own path just as surely. Sarah took one last look at her cabin, then straightened her shoulders. I'll come with you. As they walked away from the only home she'd known for a decade, Sarah felt something unfamiliar. Not quite hope, not yet, but possibility. A future not defined by her status as an Omega or an orphan, but by her own choices. Ethan walked beside her, matching his stride to hers, the Alpha King and the Omega moving forward together into an uncertain future. The storm has passed, Sarah Reed, he said quietly, but I suspect the real journey is just beginning. As they moved deeper into the forest, away from Sarah's cabin and the Pine Ridge territory, the landscape began to change subtly. Ancient pines grew taller, more majestic. The air carried different scents, richer somehow, as if the very land recognized different ownership. Sarah walked alongside Ethan, still processing everything that had happened. Royal wolves surrounded them in a protective formation, many nodding respectfully as they passed. These weren't the weakened creatures she dragged across her threshold days earlier, but powerful warriors moving with confident grace. Your father and I served together before either of us became wolves, Ethan said suddenly, breaking the contemplative silence between them. 32 years ago, Desert Storm. Sarah glanced at him, surprised. She'd known her father was a veteran, but he'd spoken little of his service. He saved my life twice, Ethan continued. Once as a human soldier, pulling me from a burning vehicle. The second time after we'd both been changed during the Northern Rebellion. How did you both become werewolves? Sarah asked, realizing she'd never heard this part of her father's history. Ethan's expression grew distant with memory. A classified mission went wrong. We encountered something unexpected in the mountains of Afghanistan. James got me out, but we were both bitten in the process. He touched the scar across his chest absently. We discovered what we'd become together. Learned to control it together. When I was chosen to lead the royal pack after the previous alpha died without an heir, James was my first choice as beta. But he became beta of Pine Ridge instead, Sarah said, puzzled. Why? Your mother, Ethan said simply. Elise was from Pine Ridge. James chose love over ambition. I respected his decision, though I missed his counsel. Sarah absorbed this new understanding of her parents. And Victor? How does he fit into this? Ethan's expression darkened. Victor Steele was already alpha of Pine Ridge when your father joined the pack. He accepted James because of his military background and strength, but there was always tension. Victor resented any challenge to his authority, real or imagined. And he resented that my mother chose my father over him, Sarah added quietly, remembering the way Victor had looked at her mother, even years into her parents' marriage. Yes, Ethan confirmed. When Conrad Frost began building his separatist movement, he found willing allies in wolves like Victor, alphas who chafed under council rule. They paused in a small clearing to allow the other wolves to rest briefly. Sierra approached, now in human form, carrying a pack that someone had retrieved. Your Majesty, she said formally to Ethan, then turned to Sarah. I thought you might appreciate these. Clean clothes, some food. Sarah accepted the pack gratefully. Thank you for everything. Sierra smiled, the expression warming her usually serious face. You saved us first. The royal pack repays its debts. As Sarah moved away to check on the other wolves, Sarah turned back to Ethan, who was watching her with that same calculating expression. You knew my father well, she said. Did you know my mother too? Not as well, Ethan admitted. But I knew of her reputation. Elise Reed was known throughout werewolf society as a true Omega. A true Omega? Sarah frowned. What does that mean? Ethan seemed to choose his words carefully. Most people misunderstand what Omega truly means in werewolf hierarchy. It's not about weakness or submission. In the oldest traditions, before power corrupted the understanding, Omegas were healers, peacekeepers, the heart of the pack. He glanced at her thoughtfully. Your mother could calm raging alphas with a touch, heal wounds that should have been fatal, sense emotions others tried to hide. These abilities made her valuable, but also vulnerable. Sarah thought of the strange warmth that sometimes flowed from her hands when tending injuries. The way she could occasionally sense others' feelings without being told. "You think I inherited these abilities?" she asked. "I know you did," Ethan replied. "I felt your energy when you healed Riley's paw, when you faced Victor without flinching. These are not coincidences, Sarah." Before she could ask more questions, Lucas approached, his salt and pepper hair gleaming in the winter sunlight. "Your Majesty, we should continue. Scouts report Conrad's wolves circling back toward our position." Ethan nodded, immediately alert. "How many?" "At least 30, Lucas reported grimly. "They've called reinforcements." Ethan surveyed their group critically. "Many of our wolves are still recovering. We need to reach the valley without engaging." Sarah looked between them, trying to understand the tactical situation. "Can I help somehow?" Lucas glanced at her with new respect. "Perhaps you can, Lady Reed. True Omegas can mask sense, confuse tracking. If your abilities are anything like your mother's." "I don't know how," Sarah admitted. "I never received any training." Ethan considered her for a moment. "Instinct may be enough. Your wolf knows what to do, even if you don't yet understand it." "The Thornhart bloodline carries ancestral memory," Nadia added, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. "In moments of great need, abilities dormant in the blood can awaken suddenly. It's how the original bloodline survives centuries of persecution. The knowledge isn't learned, it's remembered." Sarah frowned. "You're saying I might have abilities I don't even know about?" "More than might," Ethan said. "Your mother displayed similar patterns. Small manifestations of power throughout her life, then extraordinary abilities when threatened. The blood knows when it's needed most." He nodded to Lucas, who brought forward several younger wolves. "Focus on calm thoughts, on protection. Let your energy flow around them as if you're creating a shield." Sarah felt ridiculous, but closed her eyes and tried to concentrate. She thought of her cabin during the storm, a shelter against deadly cold, of 15 wolves breathing easier under her care, of safety. A strange tingling sensation spread from her core to her fingertips. When she opened her eyes, the younger wolves were staring at her in amazement. "Their scents are masked," Sierra confirmed, sniffing the air. "Not completely, but enough to confuse pursuers." Ethan's golden eyes gleamed with approval. "Natural talent. With proper training, you'll be formidable." They continued their journey, moving swiftly through the deepening wilderness. Sarah's mind whirled with new information, new possibilities. Her entire understanding of herself, her parents, and her place in the world had been upended in less than a week. "There's something else you should know," Ethan said as they navigated a particularly steep section of forest. "Something that may explain Victor's specific hatred of your family." Sarah glanced at him inquiringly. "Your mother's maiden name wasn't always Reed," he said carefully. "Before marriage, she was Elise Thornhart." The name meant nothing to Sarah, but she noticed several nearby royal wolves reacting with shock. "The Thornharts were one of the original 7 werewolf bloodlines," Ethan explained, "known particularly for producing powerful Omegas with unique abilities. The line was thought extinct after the purges 3 generations ago." Sarah struggled to process this. "Are you saying I'm some kind of werewolf royalty?" "Not exactly," Ethan replied, "but your lineage is significant. If Victor knew, it would explain his determination to eliminate your family while keeping you ignorant of your heritage." A howl cut through the forest before Sarah could respond. Then another, closer. "They found us," Sierra called urgently. "Coming from the east, moving fast." Ethan issued rapid commands, reorganizing their group into defensive positions. "Sarah, stay close to me." The first attackers burst from the underbrush moments later, white-marked wolves snarling with bared teeth. Royal guards met them head-on, the forest erupting into a chaos of snapping jaws and flying fur. Sarah watched in horror as Lucas took down 2 attackers only to be ambushed by a third. Without thinking, she moved toward him. "Sarah, stop!" Ethan called, but she was already halfway across the clearing. Lucas's attacker had him pinned, jaws closing toward his throat. Sarah felt something surge within her, a protective fury that transcended conscious thought. She slammed into the attacker, not with physical strength, but with a wave of energy that sent the wolf tumbling backward. The attacking wolf recovered quickly, turning toward her with murderous intent. Sarah stood her ground, something primal awakening inside her. As the wolf lunged, she felt her body changing, bones shifting, her first transformation triggered by pure instinct. The shift was painful but fast. Her human consciousness briefly submerged beneath wolven instinct. When it cleared, she stood on four legs, seeing the world through new eyes, smelling it through a nose thousands of times more sensitive. The attacking wolf faltered, clearly surprised by her appearance. Sarah caught a glimpse of her reflection in the wolf's eyes and understood why. Her wolf form wasn't the small, weak creature one would expect from an Omega. She was sleek, silver-furred, with distinctive white markings across her chest that formed a patterns like a thorn bush. The Thornheart sigil, she realized, knowledge emerging from some ancestral memory. Before the attacker could recover from his surprise, Ethan's massive black wolf form crashed into him from the side, teeth closing on the back of his neck. The fight was over in seconds, the attacker going limp in submission rather than risking death at the Alpha King's jaws. Around them, the battle turned decisively in favor of the Royal Wolves. Seeing their leader defeated, the remaining attackers retreated into the forest. Ethan shifted back to human form, approaching Sarah, who remained in wolf form, still adjusting to the new sensations. "Easy," he said softly. "Focus on your human self. Picture your body, your hands, your feet. The shift back is easier than the first transformation." Sarah concentrated, feeling the change ripple through her more smoothly this time. When she stood on two legs again, she felt different, stronger, more connected to something ancient within herself. "That was remarkable," Ethan said, genuine admiration in his voice. "First shifts are rarely so controlled, and your wolf form—" He shook his head in wonder. "The markings," Sarah said. "They're from my mother's family?" "Yes," Ethan confirmed. "The white thorn pattern is unmistakable. It confirms everything I suspected." Lucas approached, limping slightly, but otherwise unharmed. He bowed deeply to Sarah. "Thank you for your intervention, Lady Thornheart." The name struck Sarah like a physical blow. Lady Thornheart. Not Reed, not Omega. A name with history, with power. "We need to move," Sierra urged, approaching with fresh urgency. "They'll return with greater numbers." Ethan nodded, helping Sarah steady herself after the exertion of her first transformation. "We're close to royal territory now. Another hour's journey." As they resumed their trek, Sarah felt Ethan's eyes on her, evaluating, considering. "What does all this mean?" she finally asked. "The Thornheart lineage, these abilities, my wolf form. What am I supposed to do with any of this?" Ethan's expression softened. "That, Sarah, will be entirely your choice. But I believe, as your father did, that you were born for something extraordinary." He glanced ahead, where the forest began to thin, revealing glimpses of a valley nestled between mountain peaks. "Welcome to royal territory," he said as they crested a ridge, revealing a breathtaking vista below. The valley sprawled before them, a hidden paradise untouched by human development. At its center stood not the rustic cabins Sarah had expected, but a small, elegant city. Stone buildings with ancient architecture blended harmoniously with the natural landscape. In the center, a castle of gray stone rose majestically, its towers reaching toward the sky. "Home," Ethan said simply, "and sanctuary for as long as you wish to stay." Sarah stared in wonder at the hidden world before her. After a lifetime of believing herself the lowest of the low, unwanted and unvalued, she stood at the threshold of a new beginning. Whatever came next, she would face it not as a helpless Omega, but as Sarah Thornheart, daughter of heroes, inheritor of an ancient legacy. For the first time in 10 years, she felt something bloom in her chest that she'd almost forgotten. Hope. The descent into the valley took another hour, winding down paths visible only to those who knew where to look. As they approached the city, Sarah noticed subtle sentries positioned among the trees, nodding respectfully as Ethan passed. "Our home is hidden from human eyes," Ethan explained, "protected by ancient magic and modern technology. The humans believe this entire area is part of a private nature reserve, toxic from old mining operations." Sarah took in the scale of the deception. "And this has worked? For how long?" "Centuries," Ethan replied. "We adapt our methods as human technology advances. Currently, satellite imaging shows only dense forest. Ground sensors detect toxins that don't actually exist. Drones malfunction. GPS systems fail. The perimeter is 20 miles in each direction," Sierra added. "Humans who wander too close feel an inexplicable urge to turn back. Only in extreme circumstances like your blizzard do our patrols venture beyond." As they entered the outskirts of the city, Sarah was struck by how normal it appeared, despite its hidden nature. Werewolves in human form went about their daily business. Children played in small parks. The architecture blended modern convenience with traditional aesthetics, stone and wood structures featuring large windows and natural light. "We live as wolves should," Ethan said, noting her fascination, "in harmony with our dual nature. Here, no one is forced to suppress either their human or wolf side." Sarah observed how different these wolves seemed from the Pine Ridge pack. More relaxed, more confident, no posturing or dominance displays. Even the children played without the constant hierarchical jostling she'd grown accustomed to. Their arrival was causing a stir. Citizens stopped to watch, whispers following their progress. Many bowed to Ethan, but just as many were casting curious glances at Sarah. "Word travels fast," Sierra murmured. "They already know you saved the king." A tall, elegant woman with silver-streaked black hair approached, her bearing regal, despite her simple clothing. "My king," she said, embracing Ethan briefly. "Welcome home." "Nadia," Ethan replied warmly. "Thank you for managing in my absence." Nadia's sharp eyes turned to Sarah, widening slightly as she took in her appearance. "And this must be the rescuer I've heard about, the Omega who saved 15 royal wolves." "Sarah Reed," Ethan introduced, "daughter of James Reed." Recognition flashed across Nadia's face. James Reed's daughter. I should have known from the resemblance. She studied Sarah more intently. "But there's someone else in your features as well." "Elise Thornhart," Ethan said quietly. Nadia's composure broke momentarily, genuine shock replacing her poised expression. "Thornhart? Impossible." The line ended with the purges. "Apparently not," Ethan replied. "Sarah has already demonstrated abilities consistent with the bloodline, and her wolf form bears the mark." Nadia's gaze sharpened, reassessing Sarah with new intensity. "Then this changes everything," she said finally. "The council must be informed immediately." "In due time," Ethan said firmly. "First, Sarah deserves rest, food, and a chance to adjust. She's been through enough in the past week." Nadia nodded, though Sarah sensed her impatience. "Of course. I've had quarters prepared in the East Wing, close to your own." Something in her tone caught Sarah's attention. A slight emphasis, perhaps a question. Ethan either didn't notice or chose to ignore it. "Perfect. Sierra, please show Sarah to her rooms. I'll join you after I've been briefed on what I've missed." Sierra led Sarah through the castle's massive oak doors. Inside, the space opened into a grand hall that somehow managed to feel welcoming despite its size. Natural light streamed through high windows, illuminating stone walls hung with tapestries depicting wolf scenes. The floor was polished wood rather than cold stone, and fireplaces at either end radiated comforting warmth. "The East Wing is reserved for the royal family and their guests," Sierra explained as they climbed a sweeping staircase. "It's quite an honor." "I'm not sure I deserve such treatment," Sarah said, suddenly self-conscious in her borrowed, ill-fitting clothes, acutely aware of the dried blood under her fingernails from tending wounded wolves. Sierra stopped, turning to face her directly. "You saved 15 royal wolves, including our king, at great personal risk. You defied your alpha to protect strangers, and you've just discovered your entire identity has been hidden from you. If anyone deserves special treatment, it's you." Sarah had no response to that. They continued in silence until reaching a polished wooden door carved with an intricate pattern of wolves running through a forest. "Your rooms," Sierra said, pushing the door open. Sarah stepped inside and froze. The space was larger than her entire cabin, divided into a sitting area, bedroom, and what appeared to be a private bathroom. Large windows overlooked the valley, filling the space with afternoon light. The furnishings were elegant but comfortable, all in shades of blue and silver. "This is too much," she managed. Sierra smiled. "It's exactly right for a lady of your standing. There are clothes in the wardrobe that should fit. Bathroom through there. I'll have food sent up." Before Sarah could protest further, Sierra was gone, leaving her alone in surroundings more luxurious than anything she'd ever experienced. Sarah moved cautiously through the space, afraid to touch anything lest she somehow damage it. The bathroom contained a shower and a deep soaking tub. Turning a tap experimentally, she gasped as steaming water poured forth. Hot water, whenever she wanted it. In her cabin, she'd heated water pot by pot on her wood stove. Unable to resist, she filled the tub, finding scented oils on a nearby shelf. Stripping off her filthy clothes, she sank into the hot water with a groan that was almost a whimper. Days of tension began to melt from her muscles. As she soaked, Sarah tried to process everything that had happened. In less than a week, her entire understanding of herself, her parents, and her place in the world had been upended. She'd gone from being the lowest member of a minor pack to an honored guest of the Alpha King, possibly the last heir to an ancient bloodline, and she'd transformed. Sarah held up her hands, examining them as if they might still show traces of the wolf she'd become. The shift had been terrifying and exhilarating, painful and liberating all at once. For those brief moments as a wolf, she'd felt complete in a way she never had before. A knock at the outer door roused her from her thoughts. Hurrying from the tub, she wrapped herself in a thick towel and called out, "Just a moment." In the wardrobe, she found clothing in various styles, all in her size. She chose a simple outfit of soft gray pants and a blue tunic, marveling at the feel of new, well-made clothing against her skin. Opening the door, she found a young woman with a food tray. "Lady Thornhart," the girl said, ducking her head respectfully. "I've brought your meal." Sarah stepped back, allowing her to enter. "Please, just call me Sarah. I'm not used to titles." The girl set the tray on a small table by the window. "I couldn't, my lady. It wouldn't be proper." She hesitated, then added, "I'm Lily. If you need anything else, please just ask." After Lily departed, Sarah sat at the table, overwhelmed by the spread before her. Fresh bread, still warm, a hearty stew rich with meat and vegetables, fruit, cheese, and what appeared to be a small cake. More food in one meal than she'd have in 3 days at her cabin. She was halfway through the meal when another knock came. Opening the door, she found Ethan standing there, changed from his travel clothes into more formal attire, though still practical in design. "May I come in?" he asked. Sarah nodded, suddenly nervous. The man before her was the Alpha King, ruler of all North American werewolves. And she was, what, exactly, an Omega? A Thornhart? She no longer knew how to define herself. "You look better," Ethan observed, taking a seat opposite her. "Rest and food can work wonders." "And hot water," Sarah added with a small smile. "I can't remember the last time I had a proper bath." Ethan's expression darkened briefly. "Victor's treatment of you was unforgivable, even without knowing your lineage, to leave any pack member in such conditions." "I survived," Sarah said simply. "Yes," Ethan's golden eyes fixed on her face. "You did more than survive, Sarah. You maintained your compassion, your integrity, despite years of cruelty. That speaks to the strength of your character." Sarah looked down, uncomfortable with the praise. "You wanted to speak with me?" Ethan nodded. "There are things you need to know, about the Thornharts, about why your parents died, about what it might mean for your future." "I'm listening," Sarah said, pushing aside her plate, her appetite suddenly diminished. "The Thornhart line dates back to the very beginning of Werewolf Society," Ethan began. "When our kind first emerged, there were 7 original bloodlines, each with distinctive traits and abilities. The Blackwoods," he gestured to himself, "were known for their strength in battle and natural leadership. The Thornharts were known for their healing abilities, their gift for peacemaking, and their unusual connection to the natural world." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Over centuries, most of the bloodlines interbred, diluting their distinctive traits. But the Thornharts remained largely separate, preserving their abilities. This made them both valuable and vulnerable." "Vulnerable how?" Sarah asked. "Their gifts were coveted. Some believed that consuming a Thornhart's heart would transfer their abilities. Others sought to control them, to use their powers for personal gain." Ethan's expression grew grim. 3 generations ago, during what we call the Purges, a group of separatists led by Conrad Frost's grandfather systematically hunted down and killed every known Thornhart, seeking to eliminate any power that might rival their own. Sarah's blood ran cold. "But my mother survived. Elise was just a child when her family was killed. She was hidden with a human family, her true identity concealed. When she manifested as a wolf in her teens, she was discovered by the Pine Ridge Pack and brought in as an Omega, her lineage unknown to most." "Including her," Sarah guessed. Ethan nodded. "She learned of her heritage only after meeting your father, who had connections to the Royal Pack. They kept it secret to protect her. And Victor discovered the truth," Sarah concluded, pieces falling into place. "That's why he killed them." "Victor was approached by Conrad Frost with promises of power and autonomy if he joined the separatist cause. Your father discovered their alliance and warned me. Victor couldn't risk exposure, especially with a Thornhart living under his authority. So he had them killed," Sarah said, her voice flat. "Made it look like an accident, and kept me around because he didn't know Elise had passed her abilities to you," Ethan finished. Thornheart traits often skip generations or remain dormant until adulthood. He saw only an omega, not a threat. Sarah stared out the window, watching the sun beginning to set over the valley. What does all this mean for me now? What does the royal pack want from me? Ethan's gaze was steady. Your heritage gives you options, Sarah, not obligations. The abilities you've begun to manifest, healing, empathic sensing, energy manipulation, these will develop naturally. We can offer training, guidance, but your path is your own to choose. And if Conrad Frost discovers who I am, Sarah asked, will he hunt me as his grandfather hunted my ancestors? He would try, Ethan acknowledged. But unlike your mother, you're not alone. You have the protection of the royal pack. Of me, personally. There was something in his tone that made Sarah look up sharply. Ethan met her gaze without wavering, something unspoken passing between them. Why, she asked simply. Why would you personally protect an Omega you barely know? Ethan smiled slightly. I knew your father. I respected him deeply. That would be reason enough. But it's not the only reason, Sarah pressed, surprised by her own boldness. No, Ethan admitted, it's not. When you dragged me across your threshold, Sarah Reed, something happened, something neither of us anticipated. Sarah waited, hardly daring to breathe. Alphas, particularly those of the original bloodlines, sometimes experience what we call recognition, an instant awareness of compatibility, of potential. It's rare, almost unheard of between an alpha and an omega. You recognize me? Sarah struggled to understand. I felt something I have never experienced in 60 years as a wolf, Ethan said carefully. A connection, a resonance. I cannot explain it better than that. Sarah's mind reeled. What does that mean? What am I supposed to do with that information? Nothing for now. Ethan rose, his expression gentle. You've had enough revelations for one day. Rest. Adjust to your new surroundings. We can speak more tomorrow. He moved toward the door but paused with his hand on the latch. The Royal Pack Council will meet in 3 days. They'll want to meet you, to confirm your lineage. It's merely a formality, nothing to fear. After Ethan left, Sarah returned to the window, watching darkness settle over the valley. Lights appeared in windows throughout the city, creating a magical landscape of warmth against the encroaching night. So different from her solitary cabin, where her single lamp had stood against the vast, indifferent darkness. A connection. A resonance. The Alpha King himself felt something for her, something he couldn't fully explain. After 10 years of being treated as less than nothing, the idea was almost too much to comprehend. Sarah closed her eyes, remembering the sensation of shifting for the first time. The pain, yes, but also the rightness of it, the feeling of becoming who she was always meant to be. Perhaps that was what awaited her here. Not just safety or comfort, but the chance to become her true self. Sarah Thornheart, not defined by her Omega status or orphan condition, but by her own choices, her own strength. For the first time in the decades, Sarah allowed herself to think beyond mere survival, to consider a future that might hold more than loneliness and struggle, to hope. Outside her window, the moon rose above the valley, bathing the hidden world in silver light. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, the sound echoing off the mountain walls. Another answered, then another, the voices blending in haunting harmony. Without conscious thought, Sarah tilted her head back and joined them, her human voice somehow finding the right notes, the right cadence. A song of belonging, of homecoming, of beginning. 3 days passed in a blur of new experiences. Sarah explored the royal territory, guided sometimes by Sierra, sometimes by Lucas, and occasionally by Ethan himself when his duties permitted. Each day brought fresh revelations about werewolf society as it existed beyond the confines of her small pack. Most werewolves live as you did in Pine Ridge, Sierra explained, as they walked through the central marketplace where vendors sold everything from handcrafted goods to specialized equipment designed for those with dual natures. In small packs, integrated but separate from human society, keeping our true nature hidden. But not here, Sarah observed, watching a young child shift effortlessly between forms to scramble up a play structure designed for both wolf and human bodies. The valley is unique, Sierra agreed, a sanctuary where we can live according to our true natures. Some wolves spend their entire lives here. Others move between this world and the human one. Sarah absorbed everything with wonder, but beneath her amazement ran an undercurrent of anxiety. Today was the council meeting. Today, she would stand before the leaders of all 7 major North American packs and be judged. Don't think of it as judgment, Ethan had told her that morning when he'd come to check on her. Think of it as recognition. The council simply wishes to confirm what I already know. Easy for him to say, Sarah thought, as she returned to her rooms to prepare. Ethan had been born to his position, had never questioned his place in the world. She had spent a decade being told she was worthless, only to discover she might be the last of an ancient, revered bloodline. The emotional whiplash was disorienting. In her wardrobe, she found a formal outfit had been laid out. Not the practical clothing she'd grown accustomed to, but something more ceremonial. A silver-gray tunic embroidered with a subtle pattern of thorns and white thread, paired with soft leather pants and boots. A note in elegant handwriting sat beside it, appropriate for a Thornhart, Nadia. Sarah dressed carefully, surprised by how well everything fit, how the colors complemented her coloring. A knock at her door announced Sierra come to escort her to the council chamber. You look like who you truly are, Sierra said approvingly. Ready? No, Sarah admitted, but I'll go anyway. The council chamber occupied the highest level of the castle's central tower. Floor-to-ceiling windows provided a panoramic view of the valley, while the circular room itself was dominated by a massive round table carved from a single ancient tree. 7 high-backed chairs surrounded it, each carved with a different symbol. Behind them stood additional seating for advisors and witnesses. The room was already occupied when Sarah entered. Ethan sat in the largest chair, marked with the blackwood sigil of a howling wolf. To his right sat Nadia, apparently representing another of the 7 bloodlines. The remaining seats were filled by werewolves Sarah didn't recognize. 4 men and 1 woman, all carrying the unmistakable authority of alphas. Sarah felt their collective power like a physical pressure in the room, an atmosphere heavy with centuries of dominance and control. Her instinct was to lower her eyes, to present herself as non-threatening, but something inside her rebelled. She was a Thornhart. She would not cower. Lifting her chin, Sarah walked to the center of the room and waited, meeting each alpha's gaze in turn. A ripple of surprised murmurs passed through the observers. Sarah Reed, Ethan began formally, daughter of James Reed and Elise Thornhart. You stand before the High Council of the 7 packs to be recognized. I stand ready, Sarah replied, the words coming from some ancestral memory she hadn't known she possessed. An older alpha with steel-gray hair leaned forward. I knew James Reed, a good man, a true wolf. But this claim of Thornhart blood, it requires proof. The line was thought extinct. Counselor Aldrich speaks truly, Nadia said. While I personally have no doubt, having observed Lady Sarah's abilities, the council requires formal verification. Ethan nodded. Sarah, are you willing to submit to the traditional test of bloodline? Sarah hesitated. What does that involve? Nothing invasive, Ethan assured her, merely a demonstration of the abilities unique to your lineage. A younger alpha with sharp features and skeptical eyes spoke up. If she truly is a Thornhart, she should be able to heal. That was their most distinctive trait. Healing requires injury, Counselor Thorne, Ethan said, a dangerous edge to his voice. Would you volunteer? The younger alpha blanched slightly but recovered quickly. Of course not, but perhaps a demonstration of her empathic abilities? No injury required there. Nadia rose gracefully. I propose the traditional test of the 7 stones. It will confirm both bloodline and potential. The council members murmured agreement. Ethan looked to Sarah. Do you consent? Though she had no idea what the test entailed, Sarah nodded. I do. At Ethan's signal, an attendant brought forward a wooden box inlaid with silver. Nadia opened it, revealing 7 stones of different colors nestled in velvet. Each stone represents one of the original bloodlines, she explained to Sarah. Blackwood obsidian, Silverstone quartz, Thornhart jade, Moon River sapphire, Fireclaw ruby, Nightshade onyx, and Ironheart hematite. In the presence of their corresponding bloodline, they resonate. She lifted the stones one by one, placing them in a circle on the table. Place your hand over each. If you are truly of Thornhart blood, the jade will respond. Sarah stepped forward, suddenly acutely aware of the silence in the chamber, the weight of every gaze upon her. She moved her hand first over the obsidian, feeling nothing but cool stone beneath her palm. The quartz, ruby, and onyx similarly remained inert, but as her hand hovered above the jade, a warmth radiated upward, and the stone began to emit a soft, greenish glow. Gasps sounded from around the room. Impossible, someone murmured. Continue, Nadia urged, her voice tight with excitement. Sarah moved her hand to the sapphire, expecting nothing. But to her surprise, it too began to glow, though more faintly than the jade. When she reached the hematite, a similar reaction occurred. 3 stones, Aldrich said wonderingly. 3 bloodlines. Ethan leaned forward, his golden eyes intense. Sarah, do you know what this means? She shook her head, confused by the reactions around her. The Thornheart is your dominant bloodline, Nadia explained, her voice reverent. But you also carry Moonriver and Ironheart heritage, 3 of the 7 original bloodlines combined in one person. It hasn't happened in 500 years. The prophecy, Counselor Aldrich said quietly. When 3 become 1, the old ways will return. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, Ethan cautioned, though Sarah noticed a new tension in his posture. The test confirms Sarah's Thornheart lineage. That is what matters today. Counselor Thorne was staring at Sarah with new intensity. We should test the extent of her abilities. If she truly carries 3 bloodlines, she is not a laboratory specimen, Ethan cut him off sharply. Sarah has only just learned of her heritage. She deserves time to adjust, to learn at her own pace. An argument might have erupted, but a commotion at the chamber doors interrupted. A guard burst in, his expression urgent. Your Majesty, scouts report Conrad Frost's forces are massing at the northern border, at least 50 wolves, possibly more. The council exploded into activity. Ethan rose, immediately taking command. How long until they reach the valley? Hours at most, Your Majesty. They move fast and with purpose. Sarah watched the sudden transformation in the chamber. These were not merely politicians, but warriors, their movements crisp and decisive as they shed the trappings of diplomacy. Conrad wouldn't dare attack the valley directly, Counselor Thorne argued. Even with 50 wolves, he'd be outnumbered. Unless he has something we don't know about, Aldrich countered. Some weapon or advantage. Or someone, Nadia said, her gaze shifting to Sarah. Conrad's grandfather led the purges against the Thornhearts. If he's learned of Sarah's existence, the implication hung in the air. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She had gone from being a nobody to being a target in the span of a week. We evacuate the outer settlements, Ethan decided. Bring everyone inside the city walls. Deploy the guard to the northern approaches. As the council members dispersed to carry out his orders, Ethan turned to Sarah. You should return to your quarters. You'll be safest there. No, Sarah said, surprising herself as much as him. I won't hide while others risk themselves. Not again. Not after Pine Ridge. Ethan studied her face, seeming to weigh her resolve. This isn't your fight, Sarah. It is if they're coming for me, she replied steadily. Besides, I might be able to help if my abilities are what you all believe they are. Something that might have been pride flickered in Ethan's eyes. Very well. Stay with Sierra. Do exactly as she tells you. If the situation turns against us, you evacuate immediately. That's non-negotiable. Sarah nodded her agreement. As Ethan strode from the chamber, calling out orders to waiting guards, she felt a strange calm settle over her. For the first time in her life, she wasn't being left behind, wasn't being told she was too weak to matter. For the first time, her presence was valued. Whatever came next, she would face it, standing tall. The northern approach to the valley was a narrow pass between 2 sheer cliff faces, the only viable route through the mountains for a large group. If Conrad's forces intended to attack, they would have to come this way. The Royal Pack had established defense positions along the heights, with archers and scouts positioned to provide early warning and covering fire. Sarah stood with Sierra on a rocky outcropping that offered a view of the pass. Ethan had taken position with the front line of defenders, his massive black wolf form easily recognizable among the gathered forces. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the pass, creating pools of darkness where enemies might hide. Why would Conrad attack directly? Sarah asked Sierra as they waited. As Counselor Thorne said, he must know he's outnumbered. Sierra's expression was grim. Conrad Frost is many things, but he's not stupid. If he's moving against the valley, he believes he has an advantage. What kind of advantage could overcome superior numbers? That, Sierra said quietly, is what worries me. They didn't have to wait long for an answer. The first sign of Conrad's approach was not the expected wolf forms loping through the pass, but a group of humans carrying what appeared to be equipment cases. Humans? Sarah frowned. I thought the Separatists hated humans. They do, Sierra confirmed, her expression darkening. Which means those aren't ordinary humans. They're mercenaries, special forces by the look of them. As they watched, the humans began setting up what were clearly weapon emplacements. Sarah squinted, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. Those don't look like normal guns. They're not. Sierra's voice had gone flat. Those are pulse weapons. Experimental technology that disrupts the electrical signals in werewolf bodies, preventing transformation and causing extreme pain. They're supposed to be locked in military research facilities. How did Conrad get them? He has connections we weren't aware of, Sierra replied grimly. This changes everything. Before she could elaborate, a howl went up from the Royal Scouts. Conrad's wolves had arrived, streaming through the pass behind the human mercenaries. At their head ran a massive white wolf with distinctive black markings. Conrad Frost himself. Fall back! Sierra grabbed Sarah's arm. We need to warn Ethan. Those weapons could decimate our forces. They scrambled down from their position, racing toward the front lines. Ahead, Sarah could see the royal wolves beginning to advance, unaware of the danger the strange weapons presented. Ethan, she shouted, forgetting titles and protocol in her urgency. Stop. It's a trap. Whether he heard her voice or sensed her distress through some connection, neither of them fully understood. Ethan halted. The massive black wolf turned its golden gaze toward them, head tilted in query. Before Sarah could explain, a high-pitched whine cut through the air, followed by a visible pulse of energy from the lead weapon. It struck the front line of royal defenders, dropping them instantly. Wolves collapsed mid-stride, their bodies convulsing, howls of agony echoing through the pass. No! Sierra's anguished cry matched the horror in Sarah's heart. Ethan had avoided this first pulse, but as he bounded toward his fallen wolves, a second weapon fired. The energy wave caught him directly, and the great black wolf crashed to the ground, body spasming violently. Something snapped inside Sarah, a dam breaking, releasing a flood of emotion and power she hadn't known she possessed. Without conscious thought, she was running, not away from the battle, but toward it, toward Ethan, toward the fallen wolves writhing in pain. Sarah, stop! Sierra shouted behind her, but Sarah was beyond hearing. As she ran, she felt the change begin, her body shifting smoothly into wolf form. Unlike her first transformation, this one was painless, effortless, her human consciousness remaining clear and focused even as her body reconfigured itself. Yet even as her body moved with newfound certainty, Sarah's mind reeled with confusion. Knowledge she had never learned flowed through her, ancient techniques for energy manipulation, healing patterns passed down through generations, defensive spells crafted by long-dead Thornheart ancestors. The information crashed through her consciousness like a tidal wave, overwhelming yet perfectly clear in the moment she needed each piece. It terrified her, this power erupting from somewhere deep within her genetic memory, yet she couldn't deny the rightness of it, as though her entire life had been preparation for this moment. Her body knew what to do even as her conscious mind struggled to comprehend what was happening. The silver wolf with the white thorn bush marking streaked across the battlefield, moving faster than should have been possible. A third pulse weapon fired, the energy wave heading directly toward her. Acting on pure instinct, Sarah gathered the strange energy she'd felt when healing Riley's paw and projected it outward like a shield. The pulse struck her barrier and dissipated, the deadly energy scattering harmlessly. Sarah didn't slow, didn't question what she'd just done. Her entire focus was on reaching Ethan, still convulsing on the rocky ground. When she reached him, Sarah shifted back to human form, kneeling beside the massive black wolf. She placed her hands on his trembling body, reaching for that wellspring of energy inside herself. Heat flowed from her palms, green-tinged light spreading across Ethan's fur, sinking beneath his skin. The convulsions slowed, then stopped. The golden eyes cleared, focusing on her face with recognition and wonder. I don't know how I did that, Sarah said, but we need to help the others. Ethan shifted back to human form, his movements stiff but functional. The pulse weapons disable our ability to shift and control our bodies. How did you counter it? I don't know, Sarah admitted. I just reacted. Around them, more pulse weapons were firing, more royal wolves falling. Conrad's forces were advancing, the white wolf at their head looking directly at Sarah, his ice-blue gaze triumphant. He wants me, Sarah realized aloud. This entire attack is about capturing me. Ethan's expression hardened. He'll have to go through me first. He began to shift back to wolf form, but Sarah stopped him with a hand on his arm. No, we need a different approach. An idea was forming, drawn from instinct and fragments of knowledge she hadn't realized she possessed. I think I can neutralize the weapons, but I'll need your help, all of you. What do you need? A circle, as many royal wolves as can still move in time. Ethan didn't question her, didn't hesitate. He issued rapid orders, and within moments, the unaffected royal wolves were forming a protective ring around Sarah. Sierra joined them, her expression tense but trusting. Whatever you're planning, do it fast, she urged. Conrad's closing in. Sarah knelt in the center of the circle, placing her palms flat on the rocky ground. She closed her eyes, reaching for the energy that had come to her aid twice already. This time, she didn't simply draw it up, but reached outward, seeking connection with the wolves around her. One by one, she felt them. Bright sparks of consciousness, each unique, each powerful in its own way. Ethan burned brightest, his presence a golden flame in her awareness. She linked them together, creating a network of energy with herself at the center. Think of protection, she instructed, of safety, of home. The combined energy of the pack flowed through Sarah, amplifying her own power. Green light spread from her hands, racing across the ground toward the advancing forces. When it reached the pulse weapons, each machine sputtered and died, the mercenaries operating them leaping back in confusion. Conrad's wolves faltered, their coordinated advance breaking as they realized their advantage was gone. In that moment of hesitation, Ethan gave the signal to attack. The royal wolves surged forward, no longer vulnerable to the disabling technology. Conrad's forces were skilled fighters but suddenly outmatched. The battle turned chaotic, individual confrontations erupting across the narrow pass. Sarah remained in the center of what had been the protective circle, her energy spent, her body trembling with exhaustion. She watched as Ethan's black wolf form tore through the enemy ranks, headed directly for Conrad. The two alpha wolves met in a furious clash of teeth and claws, their battle separate from the melee around them. Conrad was large for a wolf, nearly Ethan's equal in size, his white fur standing out starkly against Ethan's midnight black. They circled each other, looking for openings, testing defenses. Conrad struck first, a lightning-fast lunge aimed at Ethan's throat. Ethan twisted away, counterattacking with a powerful swipe that caught Conrad's shoulder, drawing first blood. The white wolf snarled, undeterred, pressing his attack with renewed fury. They were evenly matched, both alphas of extraordinary power, both fighting for something beyond mere victory. Conrad fought for his vision of werewolf supremacy, for the legacy of hatred passed down through his bloodline. Ethan fought for his people, for the peace of the valley, and, Sarah realized with sudden clarity, for her. The battle might have ended in stalemate, but Conrad made a critical error. Seeing his forces being overwhelmed, he glanced away from Ethan for a split second. It was all the opening Ethan needed. The black wolf lunged, powerful jaws closing around Conrad's throat, not to kill but to subdue. Conrad struggled briefly, then went limp in submission, acknowledging defeat. The fighting around them slowed, then stopped as Conrad's wolves registered their leader's capitulation. Ethan released his hold and shifted back to human form. Conrad did the same, blood streaming from wounds on his shoulder and neck. "It's over, Conrad," Ethan said, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent battlefield. "Your forces are defeated. Your weapons neutralized. Surrender now and I will show mercy." Conrad's ice-blue eyes burned with hatred, but he was a pragmatist above all. "I yield," he stated, the words clearly costing him, "on condition that my wolves who survive are spared." "They will face justice, but not death," Ethan agreed, "more than you would have offered us." Conrad's gaze shifted to Sarah, who had managed to stand despite her exhaustion. "So it's true," he said, a living thorn heart. "My grandfather would be disappointed in my failure." "Your grandfather was a murderer," Sarah replied steadily, "just as you would have been." "The Thornhearts were a threat to true wolf independence," Conrad retorted. "Their powers of pacification, of control, they would have had us all living as lapdogs to humans." "Is that what you believe?" Sarah asked, genuinely curious. "That peace equals weakness? That coexistence means submission?" "Wolves are predators," Conrad said simply. "It is our nature to dominate, not cooperate. You would deny us our true selves." Sarah shook her head, feeling pity rather than anger. "You've misunderstood everything about what it means to be a wolf. Wolves survive through pack bonds, through cooperation and mutual support. A lone wolf is a dead wolf." She gestured to the royal wolves around them, now tending to injured comrades, working together even in the aftermath of battle. "This is wolf nature, caring for each other, protecting the pack. finding strength in unity, not division. Conrad had no answer for that, his expression contemplative beneath the hostility. Royal guards moved in to secure him and the surviving separatists, leading them away toward the valley, where they would be held until the council determined their fate. As the battlefield cleared, Ethan approached Sarah, concern evident in his golden eyes. "You expended a dangerous amount of energy," he said, steadying her with a hand at her elbow. "We need to get you back to the valley. Let the healers examine you." Sarah nodded, too drained to argue. As they began the walk back, royal wolves fell in around them, many stopping to touch noses to Sarah's hand or incline their heads in respect. Word had spread quickly about what she'd done, neutralizing the pulse weapons, healing the fallen, turning the tide of battle. "They've accepted you," Ethan observed quietly. "Not because of your bloodline, but because of your actions. You've earned their respect." "I only did what anyone would do," Sarah demurred. "What needed doing?" Ethan's laugh was warm and genuine. "And that, Sarah Thornhart, is precisely why you are extraordinary. Because you believe that courage, compassion, and self-sacrifice are ordinary traits, not exceptional ones." Sarah had no response to that. The truth was, she'd acted on instinct, on the bone-deep certainty that she could not stand by while others suffered. The same instinct that had driven her to open her cabin door during the blizzard, to risk her own survival for the sake of strangers. "It was unsettling," she admitted after a moment. "Like someone else was using my hands, my mind. I knew exactly what to do with the pulse weapons, exactly how to channel the pack's energy, but I've never done anything remotely like that before. It wasn't like learning, it was like remembering." Ethan nodded. "Ancestral memory. The strongest bloodlines carry knowledge within the very structure of their DNA. Survival mechanisms ensuring critical skills aren't lost even if every teacher is killed. That's why the Purges didn't succeed in eliminating all Thornhart abilities. They're encoded too deeply to be erased." Sarah shuddered slightly. "So parts of me aren't me. They're my ancestors." "They're you," Ethan corrected gently. "Just as your eye color and the shape of your face are you despite being inherited. The abilities are yours to command, not the other way around." Sarah wasn't entirely convinced, but she couldn't deny the truth in his words. Perhaps that was the true Thornhart legacy, not just the ability to heal or connect, but the compulsion to do so, even at personal cost. A gift and a burden both. By the time they reached the valley, night was falling. News of the victory had preceded them, and wolves lined the path to the castle, some in human form, some as wolves, all watching Sarah with newfound respect and curiosity. "The council will want to speak with you tomorrow," Ethan said as they reached the castle steps. "After you've rested." "About Conrad?" Sarah asked. "About many things," Ethan replied enigmatically. "But that can wait. You've done enough for one day." Sierra appeared at Sarah's side, ready to escort her to her rooms. Before they departed, Ethan caught Sarah's hand. "What you did today, neutralizing those weapons, healing the wounded, linking the pack's energy, those abilities go beyond even what the Thornharts were known for. The council believes it confirms Aldrich's prophecy." "What prophecy?" Sarah asked, too tired to recall the brief mention during the council meeting. "When three become one, the old ways will return," Ethan quoted. "It refers to the reunion of the separated bloodlines, the restoration of balance between wolf and human natures." Sarah frowned. "And they think I'm this 3-in-1 because of the stones that glowed?" "It's more than that," Ethan said carefully. "It's your abilities, your natural instinct for healing and protection, your capacity for compassion without weakness. These are traits the original werewolves possessed before division and conflict corrupted our society." "It's more than that," Ethan said carefully. "Each bloodline carries distinct powers. The Thornharts, as you've experienced, possess extraordinary healing abilities and empathic connection. The Moon River line," he gestured toward the sapphire that had glowed under her touch, "were known for their psychic gifts, telepathy, foresight, the ability to communicate across vast distances. And the Ironhearts," his voice grew almost reverent, "were legendary for their physical resilience and command over energy itself." Sarah looked down at her hands, trying to reconcile these revelations with what she'd felt during battle. "The energy shield I created against the pulse weapons." "Ironheart power," Nadia confirmed, joining their conversation. She'd been listening nearby. "The healing, Thornhart. And the way you link the pack's consciousness, coordinating our defense, pure Moon River ability. No single bloodline could accomplish what you did today. These powers were never meant to be separated, Ethan continued. The ancient packs lived in harmony, each bloodline contributing its strengths to the whole. The purges and subsequent divisions weakened us all, corrupted our society into the dominance hierarchies you experienced in Pine Ridge. And I'm supposed to, what, restore the old ways single-handedly? Sarah asked, the weight of expectations settling uncomfortably on her shoulders. No one expects you to do anything single-handedly, Ethan assured her. The prophecy speaks of possibility, not obligation. The convergence of bloodlines offers a chance to remember what we've lost, not a mandate to change the world overnight. It was too much to process in her exhausted state. I'm just Sarah, she said. I'm not a prophecy. Ethan's smile was gentle. Get some rest. We'll talk tomorrow. Sierra led Sarah to her rooms, where a hot bath and meal awaited. As she soaked away the grime of battle, Sarah tried to make sense of the day's events. She had confirmed her Thornheart heritage, discovered connections to 2 other ancient bloodlines, neutralized advanced weapons with powers she didn't understand, and apparently fulfilled some ancient prophecy. A week ago, she'd been an Omega struggling to survive a blizzard in a drafty cabin. After bathing and eating, Sarah stood at her window, gazing out at the moonlit valley. Lights still burned throughout the city as wolves celebrated their victory, tended the wounded, or simply gave thanks for survival. She could hear distant singing, the ancient songs of their kind rising into the night air. A soft knock at her door roused her from contemplation. Opening it, she found Ethan standing there, still in his battle-stained clothes. I apologize for disturbing your rest, he said, but there's something I need to say, and I find I cannot wait until morning. Sarah stepped back, allowing him to enter. In the moonlight streaming through her window, his golden eyes seemed to glow with inner fire. When I first saw you, Ethan began, dragging wolves twice your size through a blizzard, I thought you were merely extraordinarily brave. When I learned of your heritage, I thought perhaps it was bloodline that explained your exceptional nature. But today, watching you risk yourself without hesitation for wolves who were strangers days ago, I understood a deeper truth. He moved closer, his gaze never leaving her face. Your strength, Sarah Thornheart, comes not from ancient bloodlines or prophetic convergence, but from the choices you make. Every day, in the face of cruelty, isolation, and hardship, you chose compassion over bitterness, courage over fear, generosity over self-preservation. Those choices shaped you into who you are, the most remarkable wolf I have ever known. Sarah's breath caught in her throat at the raw sincerity in his voice. I don't know how to be anything else, she said simply. And that is what makes you extraordinary, Ethan replied. The council will offer you a formal position tomorrow. Advisor, emissary, healer, whatever role you prefer. But before they do, I wanted to offer something else. What? Sarah asked, her heart suddenly racing. A choice, Ethan said, to stay here not just as a member of the royal pack, but as my equal, my partner, my mate, if you wish it. The word hung in the air between them, charged with significance. In werewolf society, mating was not merely a relationship, but a profound bond, particularly between alphas. I'm an Omega, Sarah said automatically, then caught herself. Or I was raised as one. You are Sarah, Ethan corrected gently. Omega, Thornheart, 3-in-1, prophecy fulfiller. All of these describe aspects of you, but none define you completely. Just as Alpha King is only one facet of who I am. He took her hand, his touch warm and steady. I offer this not because of prophecies or politics, but because in you I found something I never expected to find. Someone who sees past titles and bloodlines to the wolf beneath. Someone whose strength complements my own. Someone I would be proud to stand beside in battle or in peace. Sarah looked into his golden eyes, searching for uncertainty or calculation, and finding none. Only sincerity, respect, and something deeper. Something that made her wolf stir with recognition. The council might not approve, as she said, testing his resolve. A former Omega as the Alpha King's mate? Ethan's smile was wolfish. The council exists to advise, not command. Besides, after today's display of your abilities, I doubt any would dare object. Sarah thought of all that had happened, all that had changed in such a short time. She had lost the life she knew, but it had been a life of isolation and survival, nothing more. What Ethan offered was something she had never dared dream of: belonging, purpose, partnership. Yes, she said simply. I choose yes. The tension in Ethan's shoulders released, and he drew her gently into his arms. Then we face whatever comes together, Sarah Thornhart, as equals. Outside the window, the moon shone down on the valley, on the hidden world of wolves who lived between two natures. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new responsibilities. Conrad would face justice. The prophecy would need to be understood. The seven packs would have to adapt to the changes her existence represented. But tonight, Sarah allowed herself to simply exist in this moment of connection. The lowest had become among the highest, not through birthright or power, but through the steady accumulation of choices made from compassion rather than fear. As Ethan's lips found hers, sealing their agreement in the most ancient way, Sarah felt the last pieces of her old identity fall away. She was no longer the Omega who endured, the orphan who survived. She was Sarah Thornhart, who had saved 15 wolves from freezing to death and, in doing so, had saved herself. The cold had finally, truly passed. The spring thaw came to the valley, bringing with it new life and renewal. Wildflowers carpeted the meadows, their vibrant colors a stark contrast to the pristine white that had dominated the landscape during Sarah's first days among the royal pack. 1 year. It seemed impossible that so much could change in such a short time. Sarah stood on the balcony of the eastern tower, watching young wolves training in the courtyard below. Some practiced in human form, others as wolves, a few shifting between states with increasing fluidity under Lucas's watchful eye. Among them were 3 Omega wolves from different packs, brought to the valley for training after word spread of the Omega Queen who had helped defeat Conrad Frost. They're improving quickly, Ethan said, joining her at the railing. His hand found hers naturally, their bond now as familiar as it was profound. Lucas is a good teacher, Sarah replied. Strict but fair. Like someone else I know, Ethan smiled, his golden eyes warm with pride. The Thornhart Academy has transformed pack relations across the continent. 6 more Omegas arrived next month. Sarah nodded, still sometimes surprised by what they'd accomplished. The Academy had been her idea, a place where Omegas could learn their true heritage and abilities, where they could find strength instead of rejection. What had begun as a sanctuary for a handful had grown into a movement. Any word from Pine Ridge? She asked. Derek's latest report indicates the pack is thriving under his leadership. Elizabeth has established a healing center based on your methods. Ethan paused. And Victor has completed his year of service. The council will review his case next month. Sarah had advocated for Victor's rehabilitation rather than execution, a decision that had surprised many, but ultimately reinforced the new path she and Ethan were forging. One of reconciliation rather than retribution. And Conrad? Still under guard, but his perspective is evolving. Your weekly visits have had an impact, though he'd never admit it. A small smile played at Sarah's lips. The separatist leader remained stubborn, but she'd seen flickers of doubt in his eyes as she shared the ancient histories she discovered in the royal archives. Histories that showed a time before dominance hierarchies, when wolves of all bloodlines had lived in balance. Nadia approached from across the courtyard, a leather-bound book tucked under her arm. The royal historian had become an unexpected ally and friend, her initial skepticism transformed into fierce loyalty. We found another reference to the Convergence, she announced without preamble. In text predating the purges by 3 centuries, it speaks of the threefold flame that will rekindle what was lost. Sarah accepted the book, handling it with reverence. Thank you, Nadia. I'll study it tonight. As Nadia departed, Sierra appeared with her mate Owen, their newborn daughter cradled in his arms. The child, born just 3 weeks earlier, had already shown signs of unusual abilities, the first of a new generation that might carry multiple bloodlines. May we? Sierra asked, offering the infant to Sarah. Sarah took the tiny bundle, feeling the now familiar warmth flow through her palms as she connected with the child's essence. She's strong, she murmured. Thornhart and something else, something new. The beginning of healing, Ethan said softly, for all our kind. As the sun set over the valley, casting long shadows across their home, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From a freezing cabin where she'd made the fateful decision to open her door, to this moment of peace and purpose. The future stretched before them, uncertain but full of possibility. The council meeting tomorrow will be contentious, Ethan warned. The proposed alliance with the human conservationists will face opposition. Sarah squeezed his hand. Then we'll face it together, as we have everything else. The cold had passed, giving way to growth. And Sarah Thornhart, once the lowest, now stood tall, not because of prophecy or bloodline, but because of the choices she continued to make day after day, to choose compassion over fear, connection over isolation, hope over despair. The path forward wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in centuries, it was open to all who wished to walk it.